Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever in the world you are. You are listening to / watching Courageous Self-Love, the official podcast for the self-love revolution. And this is a monumental moment because it's our very first video podcast, aka vidcast. And we are having a bonus episode because we have some very important juicy information to share with you. So this is a bonus episode happening in between season 1 and season 2. And I have a lovely guest here with me, Dr. B, aka the Sky Priestess. And today we are going to talk about something that I haven't seen any other astrologists talking about. And I literally learned about this aspect of astrology a couple of days ago. And I just went down a rabbit hole of looking it up, and I found that it was really, really important for people to get this information as soon as possible. So I scheduled this bonus episode with the Sky Priestess, who is here, as you can see. And I'll just let you know a little bit about her, and then we'll jump right into it. So Dr. B began her journey with astrology in 2013, when the knowledge of the stars appeared to her as an instant download. That's how you know it's real. She has literally touched the lives of thousands of people across the globe through her various articles, videos, personal sessions, and workshops in the United States, the UK, and Australia. And she has traveled and lived in numerous countries and completed her PhD in political science at the age of 25. Her personal brand of teaching combines the spiritual, the astrological, the political, the intellectual, and the numinous. What an important combinations. And while, of course, she is very compassionate, as you will see in a moment, her work is very direct, as you will also see in a moment. And it does not sugarcoat, and it really speaks to the raw, messy truth of humanity, in which we ultimately find the divine. And for those of you who are followers of Self-Love Story, and I'm sure are also followers of the Sky Priestess, you are here because that is what you are here for. The raw, messy truth of humanity, but also finding the divine in that. And so I would love to jump into talking about the theme of today. But before we do that, some of my listeners and followers are, new and or intermediate to astrology. So I would love to just talk a little bit about why astrology is important and how we can start to use it to better our lives or to inform our lives. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. First of all, I would like to say my name, just because that's a very important way of opening, an introduction, obviously, with your followers and fans who probably have not heard of me either.
Yeah.
My name is Bairavee. I am of South Indian Tamil descent. I live in Malaysia. But I've traveled all over the world for many years now, and I research different aspects of spirituality, religion, astrology, metaphysics, you name it. For me, astrology was a very sacred calling because, as Amelia described, it appeared to me as a flash one day. I went to bed, and then the next morning when I woke up, I had knowledge that there was no logical means for me to have acquired. So I put, mainstream conventional career aside, and then I kind of just gave caution to the wind and followed my instincts and intuition and worked with spirit as best as I could. So for me, astrology is something that you live, you breathe, you embody, but I don't quite see it as astrology. I just see it as a very mathematical means of expressing what you would pick up through your intuition and your own spiritual antennae, as it were. For example, if I were to meet, say, a clairvoyant or a psychic, they might have the same impressions of the possibilities of a person's future that I might have. And the only difference is one's using a frame of reference that can be numerically quantified and expressed, and the other is using a different system of divination. At the end of the day, I feel that astrology is a very, very good tool because it has a certain basis that is not subjective. And that's not to put down psychic work, clairvoyance, tarot, and other methods of divination, because I use those as well. But when you are talking to someone who has very much been indoctrinated into a overly philosophical, overly analytical, overly logical means of seeing reality, astrology is a very powerful mean of creating that gap between the logical and the intuitive, because it comes down to the numbers, which you really cannot argue with. So in that sense, it's a very powerful bridging gap or bridging perspective between a very ancient relationship that humanity has had for tens of thousands of years with the stars and with the contemporary society in which we live. Also, before I proceed further, I should let you know that I have two cats near me. So if you see me suddenly looking to one corner, it's to make sure that one cat isn't killing the other.
Well, that's good. It's probably also some sacred animal medicine that we all need too. Thank you so much for sharing about that. I love that you really bring in the rational, logical reason why it's just a great divination tool to use. And so there's so many different directions that we can go with this, but there's one really important thing that came up that you posted recently on your YouTube channel, a video talking about this aspect, which I'll let you introduce it as well, because of course you could speak to it much better than I can. But what I love about what you said is that you notice not really many people are talking about this aspect, and it has huge influences in 2020. So can you jump in and tell us a little bit about what's going on in 2020?
Okay. Now, first of all, I mean, it's like a piece of, or rather a wheel of a cake, or a giant wheel of cheese, depending on who's looking at it, they're going to slice it in different ways. And each person is going to take that slice that resonates the most with them. So my perspective doesn't invalidate anything else that has been said, but rather I would say it is a rather critical slice that has been missed. And that can't, it's not exactly something to go on a pedestal about, because technically speaking, there are more than 20,000 named bodies in the skies that you could be using when you talk about astrology. I use about 150 of them in my work when I do readings. But most of the time when people talk about astrology, they talk about the basic stuff. Sun, Mercury, Mars, Neptune, and maybe some of the goddess asteroids and the nodes, and maybe Black Moon Lilith, and then people stop there. But when you look at the asteroids and centaur planets and trans-Neptunian objects and so on and so forth, things really go down to a micro level of detail. And if you're not used to working at that level of detail, it's very easy to overlook some of the deeper pictures or deeper parts of the puzzle. So as I was looking at 2020 as a whole, in fact, my followers know that when I was looking at the year as a whole, I just started cussing. I cussed my laptop so badly on New Year's Day that it died. And I had to go and I had to go and resurrect it. I didn't tell them why I was cussing it until recently, when I felt like I couldn't hold in the knowledge any longer. Now, there is a body which is classed as what is known as a centaur of small solar system body, and it's called Thereus. That's Thereus. For those of you who want its catalog number, it's 32532. So Thereus, as an astrological body, is something which most people have not heard of, because one, it's one of those teeny tiny things that really esoteric astrologers use, like myself. And two, Thereus is actually quite scary when you think about it. In mythology, which is where you always look back to, you always go back to when you're trying to understand astrology, because there is a powerful link between the two. In mythology, Thereus was a centaur who was hunter-stalker. So what he would do is he would go into a forest and he would sit and stalk and watch bears. And he would keep watching those bears. And one fine day, when he decided he wanted to have them, he would pounce into the cave of the bear, hit it on the head, and drag it out kicking and screaming. Thereus was eventually killed when he went to the wedding of his half brother and tried to do horrible things to the female guest there and run away with the bride. He was finally killed by the hero Theseus. Now, when we look at Thereus in astrology, wherever it occurs in a person's chart, this is where a person has the greatest likelihood of being predated upon. In other words, this is where a person can feel as though they are being victimized, whether or not they know who's doing the victimizing. It is also a space where someone can equally, and this is something I have to thank Amelia for because I had it in my head, but I hadn't quite articulated it. But it's equally a place, a position which can show you what your own tendencies may be in playing the role of hunter stalker. It's very easy to claim victimhood because it's a lot harder to actually claim the role of the abuser, especially when you look at the journey of the soul through many, many cycles and lifetimes.
Yeah.
So when you look at Thereus, it is very much this role of covert surveillance, predation, and really feeding off of the fear of another. So that's it, that is it in a nutshell. And when I've told other astrologers about this, they've just kind of not wanted to hear it. And it's like, no, we're not gonna focus on this. I'm like, okay. One astrologer told me it was too technical. I'm like, really? Okay, cool. And very few people were actually open to hear what I needed to say. And so I thank you for kind of jumping on the boat and giving this the importance that it deserved. And that is credit to you and your own journey. In fact, I don't think you'd mind me sharing. I had a look at where Thereus was in your chart.
Yes.
And, I found that in Amelia's chart, it was in a very, very pronounced position. And I could see that through her own cycles, through her own work. I mean, even though I'd never met her before, I just got a quick snapshot of the kind of woman this being is and the kind of work she would have to do to run the business that she's running with the frequency that she's running it at. And clearly, this is someone who's gone through, many life cycles of betrayal, many life cycles of abuse, but at the same time has almost needed to, in a very radical and almost, I would say, ruthless way, pursue the path of self-love in a spiritual context. And so it gave me a little bit more insight to her, but it also helped me see why she responded to the message a lot faster than anyone else did. Because when you are willing to be aware of the message, that's when you're going to receive it. When you're wanting to kind of hide it under the carpet, that's when you're going to want to deny it.
Yeah. And most people were wanting to deny it, I'm seeing. And so, just to distill it into a nutshell, what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm getting this correctly, is Thereus is this aspect that um, when it's active, or I don't know how you would say it, but it kind of tends to themes in our life of either feeling victimized, whether quite literally, like physically, right,
Yes.
or emotionally, spiritually, um, or like we said, there could be the flip side where we're tending to also be the abuser. And the things that come up to mind for me is because, with documentaries like Surviving R. Kelly Part 2 that came out earlier this year. And actually, in my own personal life, there's a dance community in New York City that I was part of when I was living in New York City, and some news came out about someone who is fairly prominent in that world sexually abusing and assaulting some of the dancers in New York. And so there's all these themes coming out, and I'm just curious, how do we kind of translate the two? Like, does Thereus, is that part of it? Probably.
Absolutely. I would absolutely agree with that, especially if it's something that came out now or recently. See, right now, Thereus is in the sign of Leo. This is the energy that deals with the energy of drama, art, anything to do, for example, anything to do with a dance company. It also deals with children, politics. It basically deals with those aspects of our lives that really we just want to enjoy, that kind of thing that brings us a lot of spark and a lot of happiness. And unfortunately, this is where the predator is striking.
Yes.
So, But the example that you provided is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
Right
And
on.
of course, there are a lot of unsavory things. Exactly. There are a lot more unsavory things that are also coming out, especially with respect to the way society has treated children. So when you put the two together, you can kind of add it up. But when we look at Thereus and Leo, and let's take a step back and look at the astrology. The reason why I actually talked about this was because this recent full moon in Leo was conjunct Thereus.
Yes.
So, while most websites were celebrating, it's a great time to step into your power, it's a great time to roar, it's a great time to have fun,
Right.
I'm going, no. Fine, raw, step into your power, have fun, but be aware of your boundaries, people. Look at the areas that you don't want to look, because that's where something very vital to you may be being drained at this very instant, at this very moment. Whether it's spirituality, whether it's mass consumerism, it's all gotten too wrapped up in this feel good culture of needing to really be happy about whatever we write and experience, but that's not the reality we live in. In fact, then this was the reason why I kind of finally said, I have to do an article on this, because I was actually keeping this knowledge away for about 4 years. When I first learned about Thereus, I actually correlated it with other things, for example, terrorist attacks. So it has a huge application. It would be of interest to study for people who are trying to understand the psychology of mass shootings, the psychology of terrorists, and really the psychology of intimate violence and abuse. I'm actually planning to do a book on this, which details my findings. So I sat on this for 4 years, simply because
Information too, and it
okay,
must
that sound in the background, like I said, is cat. One
the cat.
basically trying to be a hunter stalker.
They're not killing
So
each
they're not killing each other. They're just trying to distract me as much as possible. Um, and if I put them in the room, they're just gonna meow really, really loud. So believe me, this is better. But what I did find is that this year, nearly half of the full moons and half of the new moons have some direct aspect to Thereus. And even if it's not a direct aspect, it's a very important alignment. Like Thereus might be doing something with Venus, Thereus might be doing something with Jupiter at the same time of a new moon and a full moon. So I just kind of went, you know what, I can't sit on this any longer, because as an astrologer and a priestess, I have to be very careful with what I share. When you share information like this and you don't prepare people, it actually gives a greater incentive to those who are ungrounded to kind of go, oh no, the world is terrible, I'm super scared now, Sky Priestess said this. So I just sat on it for 4 years. And I was just like, no, no, no. And finally, I felt the need to push it out.
Yeah.
So, what I'm actually seeing with the energy of the full moons and the new moons is that each time we're being asked to become more discerning, more discerning, more discerning as to where our energy is going in ways that are unsavory or in ways that we don't want to acknowledge. Which is why, at a practical level, I've basically told people, look, these are the key things that you can do. If you are a parent, listen to your child. Have a conversation with your child around talking to people that they don't know, or give them a vocabulary or even a quote that they can use if something wrong is happening, whether it's at school or whether it's with a family friend. I recall reading on Facebook where a child's cries for help were ignored because her parents had taught her how to refer to her sensitive areas as her cookie. So each time she talked about someone cookie, the parents didn't get it and they didn't put two and two together. So, I mean, it's not a pleasant subject, but really, you want to protect your kids, you need to make sure that they have the language to handle this. If you are someone whose body is regularly seen as something to target, whether, even if you're a young woman or if you're a trans person or even if you're a dude and you just seem, like you're defenseless for whatever reason, this is not a year to be taking unnecessary risks. If you go out to the pub or something or the bar, go with friends, make it a social event. You don't want to be hanging out in spaces where you are defenseless and you don't know who's watching you.
Right.
So, you've got to be careful with this because there's a difference between living in paranoia and there's a difference between being mindful. Whether you're having fun, whether you're just going about with your reality, I think it would be much better if people realize there is a higher than average risk of something of this nature happening. If not to them, then at the very least, someone around them.
Right.
So, the way I've taken this is to basically encourage people to stand together, watch out for each other. Communities in the past did this by, for example, and they still do it today, forming something like the neighborhood watch. It doesn't mean that that's going to completely erase crime. It just means that someone knowing that a neighborhood has a bunch of volunteers or something going around and making sure everybody is okay is far less likely to experience these kinds of violations.
Yeah.
So when we actually take proactive measures to look at a physical level to see how we can actually help the most vulnerable, the most targeted, that doesn't create a vibration of fear, that creates a vibration of solidarity. One more thing I would add, and this particular layer of interpretation was inspired by the writer Mark Andrew Holmes. He saw the bear as indicative of the energies of indigenous people, which I would absolutely agree. And if you look at what's happening in Canada right now, so close to the full moon in Leo, if you look at what's happening right now, you're seeing the Canadian Mounties going in and arresting Indigenous matriarchs when they're at the ceremony to honor missing girls and women. So, really, this is the kind of energy which also says that we need to protect our environment. We need to look at the way politics and politicians in particular justify predating upon our natural resources and the indigenous communities that live upon them. So, this is really a year where our willingness to protect that which needs protection is going to be one of the ways we actually find strength in 2020. A lot of people are afraid of 2020. This is the challenge. This is the body that is bringing in those challenges. And we need to face it eye to eye
Yeah.
rather than trying to ignore.
I love everything that you're saying, and I just want to pull out some pieces too, so I can help those watching
Go
and
ahead.
listening to
And
further.
thanks for waiting.
Yeah, just to further digest, because it's a lot. And I remember too, when I watched your video, I just kind of had to sit for a moment and digest all that information. And I do agree with you when you told me that in my chart there's a lot of aspects of Thereus, and it speaks to why I'm like, let's tackle this, because I'm very much about not hiding from the truth. And I think out there, spirituality is very like love and light. We are all brothers and sisters, and the universe is always on our side, so nothing's wrong. And it is just such a disservice to the actual messed up things that are happening. And I think this is a call, like you and I are making a call to action for people to say the time is to stop denying the darkness in the world, and because we're afraid of it or because it's uncomfortable to look at. We must look at it, we must face it on a global level, but also within ourselves. And we have to talk about these things, right?
Mhm.
And so for me, I was sexually abused as a young child. I had incidents just kind of peppered throughout my life, and I didn't have the language to share it. And I really love the call to action that you have, because what I'm hearing is, I think a lot of people watching and listening can be like, oh my God, now I need to be totally afraid and protect myself and shut all the doors and board all the walls. And I don't think that's what we're saying. I think it's a call to action to be brave. And being brave requires being honest and direct about what's going on. And so I love that call to action of like, speak to your children about, okay, when someone trusting their instincts, and when something doesn't feel right, you tell mommy, or you tell auntie or whoever, and this is what you can say. Like, these are the words you can say, and this is also what you can say in those moments when something might happen. Giving people language. And also too, this is not like when you were talking about going out socially, right? You're not saying, oh my gosh, stay inside and don't go out anymore. Just be mindful and go with friends. And this isn't a time to be reckless and frivolous and just getting, blackout drunk by yourself, because things can happen, right? And I mean, I love that. And I think a lot of people listening can easily translate it as, oh my God, we're doomed. And it's like, no, we're not doomed. This is a call for us to be even stronger than we are before. And I love how you said, like, the medicine is solidarity. Yeah, so good.
But Theseus defeats Thereus, and it's so similar. Their names are so similar. I know the Greeks. What can I say? But but see, Thereus does get defeated. So it's not an energy which is, it's like undefeated or no one can do anything about it. In fact, I wish I had remembered this earlier, but divine timing. I was just writing this and feeling so depressed, like I couldn't find a way to express what needed to happen to people. And I spoke about this in my video as well. I remembered a certain movie with J-Lo,
Mm-hmm.
and it was enough. Actually, I watched this when I was studying in Germany, so I watched it as
I watched it in
Genug.
theater. That was quite a few years ago, huh? That it came out.
It was quite a few years ago, but for some reason that stuck in my mind. And when I was writing this article, and really I was in anguish. I didn't know how to give people the guidance that they needed on this.
Right.
And finally, I remembered this movie, and this was, I think it came out 2002.
Yeah, I think it's 2000
And
thing.
it came out a while back, but the synopsis is J-Lo plays this very diminutive, meek Latina woman, and she's she's married to this very powerful, wealthy Caucasian man who physically abuses her. But eventually she sees that he would not stop at her, and if needed, he would abuse the child as well. So she kidnaps the child, and she goes off, she learns martial arts, she dies inside, but becomes much stronger, more powerful, more focused woman. And then she lures him to meet. And I'm not saying, by no means am I asking people to do this. This is a movie, people. Not asking you to go this far.
Themes,
But
literally here.
no. But what she does is she lures him, and to meet her, because she realizes that he will never leave her and her daughter alone. And he believes that she's the same woman, and he tries to physically dominate her, but she kills him because now she has knowledge of martial arts and she knows how to do it. And she makes it look like it's an accident, and of course cries a little bit, and she gets away with it. But like I'm saying, I'm not saying people should do this, but it was that literally was just how she actually took down her hunter by developing a strength that he could not see, that he did not even believe existed. And when the moment came, she was able to unleash that strength to protect herself.
Yes.
And when I was trying to, I didn't, I was thanking God I remembered this, and I looked up the astrology of the movie. And at the time the movie was released, Thereus was conjunct Heracles, which is another great Greek hero. And there's actually another centaur called Thereus who gets killed by Heracles, but that's a different story. But effectively, I found this as the hero's message. You have to cultivate the strength within you to stand up when you truly need to, which is why I also advise people who are feeling timid, who are feeling overwhelmed, that maybe they can think about martial arts. The kind of martial art, when I was going through, for example, bad relationship, domestic violence, and whatnot, I went and learned Wing Chun, which is actually a martial arts that was developed by a Chinese nun. It's a boxing style that allows you to overpower a stereotypically more powerful opponent than yourself. But it's not about being aggressive. It's about defense, and it's about keeping yourself able to respond reflexively.
Yes.
And when I kind of put the dots together, I realized this is what she needed. For her, it is about having the confidence to believe that all of the fear and all of the lies of her own weakness that was being fed to her by her husband was untrue. And she was actually a lot more powerful than she gave herself credit for. To me, that was the real transformation. That was the real victory. Obviously, there will be some cases where people are literally fighting for their lives, where they're literally fighting for their futures, and they have to use force, or at the very least to defend themselves from force, at the very least. But most cases, no. This is about developing spiritual, psychological, and emotional fortitude.
Right.
And the kind of, in the way we talk about things, when we talk about spirituality, especially in the whole New Age bubble, strength is somehow, yes, you are strong for having survived things. Not necessarily. It just means that you have a lot of endurance and hit points. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have built your will or built your fortitude to actually push back when you need to. So the discussion that we have surrounding strength is one that is lacking. And I feel that Thereus, in a backhanded way, I should say, is kind of forcing us to remember what our actual strength is, and all of the lies that tell us that we're weak and that we can be predated and that we can be victimized. This is our year to take back that power. It's not a comfortable way of doing it, but nothing about Thereus is comfortable.
It reminds me of, what I'm hearing is the inspirational side of this, right? Because of course, when first hearing about Thereus, and those of you watching and listening are probably thinking like, oh God, and even my reaction was that too, like, should I just hide under the covers for the rest of the year? And that's like, what you're speaking to now is the inspirational side of it, where it's like, no, like this is a call to, I like to call them initiations, where this is an opportunity for you to initiate yourself into a stronger version of yourself that's already there, that, these incidents or these aspects are calling you to rise to that occasion. I think about, like you said, my chart is, yeah, heavily aspected in Thereus. I think you said, there's a funny moment because I think you said it's the most heavily aspected Thereus chart you've seen, and I said, I'm an Enneagram 4, and if any of you know anything about Enneagram, I'm the individualist. So, of course, something in me was like, ooh, I'm the most heavily aspected chart. But also, I was kind of like, oh crap, that's pretty heavy. But I will say, it's so interesting, like, to see the chart and see how much Thereus has aspected my life and my past lives, which I definitely have traveled to past lives. And yet, like, literally betrayal is like in every single one. And one of my themes to self-love has been about overcoming betrayal. So when you use that word, I was like, yep, that's absolutely right. But anyone who knows me, like, I've been called an optimist. I've been called joy, just personified joy, light, fireworks, dynamite. And so, part of, like, I am stronger because of the tough things that I've been through. And when I remember that movie enough, and I think of, again, we're not literally trying to stalk people and lure them and murder them. Like, let's not do that. But when I think of J-Lo's character as an archetype to what you're describing, she saw herself a certain way. And I also, when I was, and I'm sure maybe you saw it in my chart, but when I was 19 to 21, I was in an abusive relationship. And yeah, like, that relationship had me seeing myself a certain way, like how J-Lo's character, I saw myself as just meek and like a terrible, selfish person, because those were the things he was telling me that I was, and that I was worthless. And I saw myself that way. And so therefore, that's why I allowed him to treat me the way that he did, or that's why I tolerated it and stayed. But through that, I became stronger. And so anyone listening, I invite you to see that side of it and not run away in fear. This is more about stepping into your bravery. And this is also why I call the podcast Courageous Self-Love, because, a lot of people talk about self-love, and it's a very love and light-y, as we were talking about, where it's like, yay, let's have a spa day at home and self-care, which I love all that stuff, right? Not knocking it at all. But when I talk about courageous self-love, I'm saying, like, this is for the bold, the brave, those of you that are willing to stare yourself in the face, stare your fears and your demons in the face, and become, the phoenix rising from the ashes, if you will, become more of who you really are. And so while Thereus is, a covert, sneaky motherfucker, right? You're that much more badass, right? To be able to overcome it. So I love all these tools that you're bringing in, and this insight that you're bringing in. This is not something to just hide in fear. This is really a call to step into more of who you are and to fight for what you believe in and to fight for what is right.
Absolutely, and very, very well put. One of the things, and I want to bring this back to the astrology a bit, one of the things that really struck me when I was looking at the role of Thereus throughout this year is that we had a major pile up of astrological bodies in January in the sign of Capricorn. All right, that was something that's not going to happen again for a very long time.
A lot of Capricorn energy.
A lot. And what was happening that people did not want to talk about, either they didn't know or they didn't want to talk about it, was the fact that Thereus was making an inconjunct to the Capricorn conjunctions.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it was also there right at the start of the year during these incredible conjunctions of, for example, Saturn and Pluto and Ceres and so on and so forth. It was there, hiding right there. So even in January, at the very start of the year, we already see Thereus making its mark with respect to our relationship with Capricorn, which is really the dominant energy signature of 2020. It's already saying, look at me. Where are you being drained? Where are you being drained in ways that do not actually allow you to pursue your true legacy? What systems, structures, inheritances are you carrying that are actually backdoors into you? And that was already with us during that very powerful time. And we're going to see it again. Like I said, Thereus is going to be doing something with the new moons and full moons for at least half the year. But what we actually see it come around again at this very, very pivotal time in December, as the sun enters Capricorn at 0 degrees Capricorn, it will be trining Thereus in Virgo. Mercury will be at 0 Capricorn as well, and it will also be trining Thereus. With that window between December the 21st to December the 23rd or so, we're also going to be seeing Jupiter and Saturn emerge together onto 0 degrees Aquarius. And again, Thereus is going to be in conjunct. It's going to be trining the Sun and Mercury, and it's going to be in conjunct Saturn and Jupiter during the big December solstice that all the astrologers are very, very, very agog about.
Yeah.
Thereus is going to be there again. So at that point, Thereus will be in Virgo, and really, it's going to be moving across that Virgo-Leo threshold all the way into late 2021. So it's not going to be settling into that sign. But even then, it's going to ask us, okay, so you're going to be talking about networks, new consciousness, new vibrations, but how are your boundaries? How are your actual practical boundaries? How are your physical boundaries? What are you letting in the name of the greater good? What are you letting in the rhetoric of love and light? That's going to be a big lesson with Thereus again in December of the year. So January, bam. December, bam. So you can see how this body is actually accompanying key aspects of the skies in very, very, very powerful ways. It cannot be, underestimated.
Yeah. And
It's going to be about the way we make the world. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we're seeing it collectively. I think that's why there's so much political and social unrest all over the world. And so I really love the questions that you're asking, because I love always leaving listeners with like, okay, what are some practical tools, which, we've left a lot of practical tools. So definitely I invite you to re-listen, re-watch this, and take some notes and highlight some of the questions. But I really want to pause on some of them, like, how are your boundaries? Where are you being drained? Are you saying that these are questions we need to reflect on in our own life, because that it's in those areas where Thereus can have the biggest influence? Like, what are some examples or some ways of how different ways that could practically show up, or tangibly is a better word, show up in people's lives, so they can look out for it and be like, oh, this is that Thereus thing.
Understood, understood. Okay, first of all, we'll do a little recap of Thereus in Leo, so they can identify and see what's going on, and so on and so forth. But like I
Got
said,
it.
it's moving between, Leo and Virgo quite a bit, back and forth until late 2021. So we're just going to be looking at, the switch in signs this year, but you're going to be seeing a repeat of things next year as well. So just plugging this into the software real quick,
Okay.
and because I want to get the exact date. Exact date is best. Okay, here we go. So right now, like I said, Thereus is in Leo. And the energy of Thereus in Leo focuses on these patterns of predation on matters that are very close to our hearts. In fact, I would actually say the energy of Leo very strongly corresponds to the heart and the sacral chakra. They have that very embodied, alive, vital quality to them. So at a spiritual level, you can use the metaphor of the chakras to see where, patterns of predation may be going on. At the 3D level, that's your romantic relationship, your marriage, your kids. It's also about your creativity, your creative projects. In a larger framework, it's also about politics, leadership, management, how figures of authority who are able to excite your passions or put you in a state of fear have access to you.
Yep.
So
That checks
that's,
out.
yeah. At a collective level, that's something that we can see happening all over the world. But in your personal life, it's really about how that spark of joy, that spark of light in your life is something that someone wants to take away, usually by an abuse of authority or by expressing their passions or their often ego in a way that just tries to stop you from being you. So without going to extreme examples, this is really where you need to look at where your true authenticity, where your true center of joy in your heart space is kind of being blocked by someone else who just doesn't want to see you shine. There's
Wow.
a lot of bitchiness this year. Then Interiors is not the only culprit. We see a lot of activations in Eris. We see Black Moon Lilith in Aries. We see Eris of course in Aries. And these bodies are already bringing up a lot of the challenges to ego. Leo is, as a fire sign, it has a lot of issues with ego. On the one hand, it can be very generous, it can be very loving, very giving, especially when it has applause and an audience that adores it.
Yeah.
But at the flip side of Leo is extraordinarily egotistical and very, very controlling. And it can be just downright mean. So it's a year to be, yes, be open, be vulnerable, be authentic, but also give yourself the gift of being selective with whom you show that vulnerability.
Yes. That's actually, I can share a personal thing that happened last night. Um, as I mentioned, I'm getting, well, I don't know if I mentioned it on this cast, but I'm getting ready to travel around the world for a year. And so I had a going away party last night, and I was very particular about who I invited to that going away party. Whereas, old me would have like invited everybody and let's have a big party at a bar or at a club, and it would have just been like, woohoo. Um, and then, but with this, I was very particular about who I invited, who I wanted to share that part of me with. And that, I think that's in alignment with your call to action of like, where are your boundaries? Like, this is a call to be very crystal clear about your boundaries, and where are you giving your energy? where are you giving it away, or where are you sensing that someone might be trying to block it or take it away from you. And that can happen at work, that can happen in a personal relationship. um,
Yeah.
and I think, you know, aside from like, don't be fearful of those aspects, it's more a call to be more specific about your boundaries and about your energy, is what I'm hearing you say, right?
Very much so. And, I would actually say now people are talking about spiritual bypassing, they're talking about discernment, and
Yeah,
these are still catchphrases. These are still buzzwords. At the end of the day, everybody just wants to be nice. So
that's
it's like, I open my heart is open, I have childlike joy. And I'm like, "Hey, buddy, did you watch the news today?"
yeah.
But the thing is, it's about also being realistic and understanding that having an open heart is not something that should exist in a bubble or isolation, because at some point the real world is going to catch up. So having an open heart that is real, that doesn't just have, focus on sunshine and rainbows, is something that can only happen when you're willing to feel everything through that heart, whether it's deep anguish, whether it's sorrow, whether it's shame, whether it's guilt, whether it's fear. All of it goes through the heart. Otherwise, the heart gets blocked,
Yeah.
or it just hurts. I mean, literally, people die from, it's called broken heart syndrome.
Hmm.
Literally, this is something that can. And if you're someone with those kind of concerns, this is not the year for you to be repressing things or hiding things, because no matter how far to pretend that everything is going to be okay all of the time and everything is sunshiny, the real world will find a way to catch you and go, hello, look at me, I'm right here. But let's talk about Thereus and Virgo for a bit, though, because that's a different energy.
Was you say it, Thereus will be switched, like kind of flipping between Leo and Virgo throughout the year, right?
Not throughout this year, as in for this year, or I'll just give you the dates, okay?
Okay.
So it actually switches into Virgo on the 31st of October, so Halloween. It's a complete drama queen. It makes this big switch right at the time when the veil is most thin. And then it's going to be going by, as part of its retrograde, it's going to be crossing over the 0 degrees Virgo point on January the 11th, and then it'll cross back over again finally on August the 4th, 2021. So really these tipping points, 31st October, January the 11th, 2021, and August the 4th, 2021, is when Thereus will be at that 0 Virgo position before it actually settles into Virgo. So when come Halloween this year, the shift of focus is going to be less so much. I mean, yes, there will be phases where it's going to be in Leo. Let's not discount that. But the shift will be more towards looking at a different level of boundaries. Here is really where we look at our physical boundaries, our pragmatism in enforcing our boundaries. We also need to look more so at our mental health, our diets. Literally be very what energy and our feels. See, in Leo, it's very much an emotional and passionate experience. In Virgo, it's literally about how do I build this energy barrier? And for whom do I take it down? How do I, take in information and energy, and how do I digest it? How do I spit out what is really just not good for me? How do I eat foods that nourish me? And how do I avoid foods that are going to put worms in my stomach? Quite literally. So these are some of the types of energies which are going to key concerns that are going to be coming up with Thereus in Virgo. I have Thereus in Virgo. Actually, I have it in my third house, the house of writing and speaking. So if I gave in to Thereus, I wouldn't be an international speaker.
Right.
It was something I had to look at a long time ago. But in Virgo, there's also the tendency to be, Virgo by itself already tends to be kind of hypocritical of itself and sometimes other people. It can be over analytical, it can be obsessive, especially when it thinks about purity. So it can actually put a lot of pressure in Virgo by saying, I'm here, and the Virgo, it's going to stress itself out. So by knowing in advance that in the case of Virgo, it's less about the fear and more about the anxiety, we can actually prepare people to say, look, if it's giving you anxiety, it's winning. Don't let it. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, but you can mitigate things by taking very practical steps. So, for example, in terms of the diet, especially with all of this scare going on right now with coronavirus, virus, and God knows what else, it's like make sure you wash your hands before and after you prepare food. Make sure your food is cooked. And you think about simple steps like this, it minimizes the need for that anxiety. If you were to think of, so that's just a digestive example. If you're looking at the mental example, if you feel mentally oppressed by something, if you feel constantly judged or in a constant state of vigilance all of the time, that's also a way for your mental energy to be fed off. So that's something which I would say needs to be looked at as a key example of what needs to happen.
Yeah, I can relate to that because, I like to say like I'm like a former tank. Like there's this blog that I used to read about dating and relationships, and he referred to people who are always like defensive and on guard and thinking people are out to get them, and like, why did she look at me like that, and what did he mean, and I was like that. Like and I still can be like, I'm a Virgo rising, so I have those aspects. But what I'm hearing you say is these are the themes that Thereus, or this is like the call to action that these Thereus aspects are calling us into, to like take a look at these things. And now is not the time to just be like frivolous or whatever with your boundaries and just touch everything and make your food. It's like, wash your hands, watch your diet, go to the doctor, get an allergy test done to see what's nourishing for your body. So I feel very comforted hearing yeah, there are practical solutions. And like, it's interesting how talking about these themes can send people into being like, oh my God, the sky is falling. But like you said, if you're getting like that, then Thereus is winning. And it's really about, having that discipline, that awareness, that willingness to take a look at those things and be responsible. I think about it with money too, because I teach a lot about money and energy of money. And what I say to people is like, the actual act of handling money is pretty simple. It's addition, it's subtraction, it's putting money in accounts, it's filling out some forms for your taxes or whatever. But the emotions, like the drama, like you said, that we give it to it, that's what makes it like, I can't afford anything, or, oh my gosh, I'm crumbling in debt, when it's like, why don't you take a look at the debt, pay it down a little bit at a time, speak to some financial, there are practical steps to take. So I love that, and thank you so much for bringing that. I also wanted to, we touched on it a little bit, because
Mm-hmm.
especially with things like surviving R. Kelly and just other news things like that of injustices, I feel like it's so easy for people to vilify, and of course with reason, to vilify the predators or the abusers. But for me, the going deep, the self-love, the understanding yourself, I think there's also a call to action for the brave and daring, courageous self-love, for those who are ready and willing to look at the ways, what are the ways that you are being the covert hunter stalker, the ways that you are
Yeah.
being abusive. And of course, we're not pointing fingers saying you're going around abusing people, but there's archetypal themes, there's energies about it, right? And I'll call myself out first just to give an example. When I was dating, when I was single and dating, a lot of women, we all talk about it, like we, going to the club and people grabbing our butt and all that stuff, and being like, oh, these disgusting people just grabbing us and all of that. But I also, when I started to look at the ways that I was objectifying men, or that I was really just trying to stalk men, I mean, it's such a hard word to say because I wasn't outside people's houses stalking men, but like, because when I work with my clients, I call them out and I say, do you really like this person, or are you objectifying them and trying to get them to be someone that you want them to be for your agenda, because you want to have the wedding and the marriage and the kids, and you're actually not seeing this person as a person. So like it's all these like shadowy themes that we also have to call ourselves out on. What do you think about that? It's hard to talk about, but because I think a lot of people can easily, hi Kitty, a lot of people can easily misunderstand and misconstrue what I'm saying, but I'm willing for that to happen because I know what I mean.
Yeah.
And people who understand what I know what I mean. But yeah, what do you think about that as we kind of start to wrap up our conversation?
Well, I think that effectively, when you're looking at Thereus in yourself, and this is, we talked about this, we did discuss this before, we went on went live. I mean, and I've been thinking about it as well, but really one of the key things to think about is, would you be willing to do what you're doing if you knew someone else was watching you do it? And if the answer is no, ask yourself why.
Yeah.
So, because that's one of the key serious factors. That's one of the key things. If you're only willing to do something behind closed, I mean, obviously, I'm not talking about, having sex with your loved ones or going
Right.
to the
There
toilet or
are things
something.
that are
I'm not
private.
talking about that.
Yeah.
Those something private. But if you're doing something to someone that you don't want anyone else to find out, and you know it's hurting them, but you're justifying it in some way, that tends to be serious energy. So the key word here is the covert nature of things.
Yeah.
And remember, it doesn't just necessarily have to be like a stalker or something. Covert narcissists, I would also have very strong Thereus energies. Passive aggressive martyr types also have very strong Thereus energies. It doesn't have to be something that looks like violence all of the time. It can very easily be just something which you don't want to get caught doing. Sense?
I love that. No, that's so great how you bottom line that. That's such a good question to reflect on. If is it something that you would be doing if you knew people were watching? And again, use your discernment. We're not talking about going to the bathroom or private sexual activity for your own privacy, but it's like the behavior that you're doing. I think it's important to talk about that, and especially with all of this, the sexual assault news and things like that. One thing that I see people aren't admitting to or talking about is, well, what are the ways that you are perpetrating these themes and energies? It may not be literally what these horrible people are doing, but how are these themes showing up in your life? Where are you cutting people down? Where are you being covert and nasty and trying to get one over or whatever it is with malintent? And there's a whole spectrum of that, right? So it can be like really awful to just a little white lie, but still it's like, okay, some Thereus vibes there. So yeah, as we start to wrap up this conversation, which has so much goodness, what is it that you would like to leave our listeners with? I mean, there's so much, and I don't want anyone listening to be like, oh my gosh, and get into some unhealthy rabbit hole of things. What would you like to leave us with as like a next right step for us to move forward into 2020 and beyond, understanding this aspect of Thereus?
I'm looking at my cat because my cat is giving me inspiration for this.
Good.
She's trying to sit in a bag and do her thing. The thing to understand is no matter what we do at the end of the day, we can only do our best. Some people will never change, no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you beg, no matter how hard you wish them to do otherwise. And you cannot hold yourself accountable for someone else's energy and someone else's behavior. What you can hold yourself accountable for is what you do at the end of the day. Because if everyone was worried about everything, good gods, I mean, I forget the actual number, but a lot of people might even die taking a shower because they slip in the bathtub and fall.
Yeah.
Right? So if you would actually sit in that vibration of fear, That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help you, and it certainly doesn't help the ones who are closest to you who may be vulnerable. We don't have the luxury anymore. This
Yeah.
is 2020. We are all being asked to be spiritual warriors who come from a place of heart. If you care about this planet, if you care about yourself, if you care about your children, your pets, your family, your community, you're going to find the strength that you need anyway.
Yeah. Oh, so good, so good, so juicy. I'm so happy that I found you. And so, for those of our listeners and watchers who are new to your work, how can we follow you? What's the best way to follow your journey and keep getting yummy goodness and insights from you?
Thank you, Father. Um, Now, my name is hard to spell unless you've seen it being spelled. It's very long. So most people just look for the Sky Priestess. You type it in Google, you find me on Facebook. I have a website, bairavee.com. You'll see me refer to that a lot on my Facebook page. I'm on Instagram as the Sky Priestess. I'm on YouTube. Just have a Google and find me.
I love it. Thank you. And I certainly did that, and I followed all your things. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for being willing to talk about this and inspiring me to just jump on this topic and get it out there. I feel like you said, yes, there's all this new consciousness and people are hungry for this information. And I do believe more and more people want to look at this stuff, as uncomfortable as it might be. And I'm happy that you are someone that is putting that out there, and I'm happy to be another person putting that out there. So if you're watching this, share this with those that you know. Follow Bairavee, the Sky Priestess. Thank you so much for being here. I had so much fun chatting with you today.
Likewise. And thank you for your attention and commitment to courageous self-love.
Thank you. Well, there you have it. That was this episode of Courageous Self-Love, and we are out for now.